This happened almost 3 years ago on Christmas Eve. At the time, I was working a retail job at the mall. I live in a reasonably sized city and we have a great transport system. I had tried to get out of working the holidays but, of course, that didn't happen. My parents were out of state visiting the rest of my family and I had planned to take the train there to visit them early the next morning. I got off work around 9 p.m. and caught my first bus at the bus stop that was below the mall. I had my headphones in and was minding my own business when a group of 3 guys in their mid-20s got on the bus and sat behind me. I had my music playing pretty quietly and I heard them start talking about me. I've always been afraid of strangers, so I tried to play it off and tell myself I was just being paranoid, but I knew that I was in trouble. My first stop was coming up and I waited until the very last second to request my stop. The bus started slowing down and as I stood up, I heard the 3 of them do the same. At this point, I was getting a little nervous. It was nearly 10 p.m. and, although there were plenty of businesses in the area, no one was around, seeing as it was Christmas Eve and all of them were closed. I had to walk from the bus stop I'd gotten off to a different one down the street to catch the bus that would take me to my apartment. There was a little shortcut that I'd never seen anyone take before, so I got off the bus and started heading that way. These guys followed me. I reached the next bus stop while holding my mace in my pocket, something that most young women I know always have on them when taking public transport, especially at night. I sat down in the bus stop and pretended I was alone. One of the guys enters the shelter and starts talking to me. "Hey baby, how you doing? What's your name? Why you all by yourself so late at night?" I ignored him, stood up, and walked about 20 feet away from the bus stop. This is where things got really creepy. One of the other guys started walking toward me. I moved close to the street to let him pass me. He kept walking for maybe another 10 feet, then stopped and turned around. The other 2 were still standing next to the bus stop. As I'm looking at them, they started to run toward me really fast. I turned around and the 3rd guy who had passed me was doing the same. I panicked and ran across the street as fast as I could and saw that there was a fast food restaurant still open down the road. I looked behind me and saw that these guys were still chasing me. I booked it to the fast food joint and ran inside. I told the guy at the counter what had just happened. He was a terrifying looking dude, maybe 6'4", in his early 30s and covered in muscle. The guys had waited outside for a moment, but I'm pretty sure they bolted when they saw me talking to him. The employee took off out the door in search of them but couldn't find them. I waited there for almost an hour to make sure they wouldn't come back. I was too afraid to go wait for the next bus, so I ended up spending my train money for the next morning on a cab to get home and spent that Christmas in bed watching TV. Not as crazy as some people's stories, but it was such a terrifying experience for me. For a small bit of background, I'm from a small town in the UK and everything is quite spread out. My mom lived on a small street on the edge of town. The incident happened on Christmas Eve in 2011. I was visiting home from my university up north for Christmas and had gone out with some friends from the area for a catch-up and to celebrate the season. It had gotten late, I was a little drunk, and I needed to catch a taxi to get home. I didn't want to call my mom so late at night to pick me up and it was too far to walk. I forgot that the taxis were all charging double fares because it was Christmas and I had only saved £10 rather than the £20 that was going to cost me that night. I didn't have my bank card, silly, I know, and thought that I should wake my mom up after all. While I was thinking that, a taxi came and even though it was Christmas, the driver charged me £10 for the ride. I was very grateful to him for the ride. As I was getting in, he told me to sit in the front with him. I didn't think anything of it and sat in the passenger seat. I give him the street name and we set off. He seemed very friendly at first, asking how my night had been, what my Christmas plans were, and just regular chatter. At some point I mentioned that I was visiting from university and he asked what I was studying, to which I replied motorsport engineering. At this point, he became fascinated with me and what I was studying. He kept making comments about how he would never have imagined a girl as young and beautiful as me would be interested in cars. He thought it was incredible. I had some weird reactions when people found out what I did before, so I just smiled and nodded to keep things friendly as we were nearly at my street. Then things got a bit weirder. We pulled up in my street, a few doors down from my house and of course, it was super dark. He was still going on about how he never would have believed it, I was too pretty for that, and he would love to see me working on cars. I'm drunk, tired, and a bit creeped out by his obsession with me and what I study at this point, so I tried to give him the money and get out. But he won't take it, he just ignores my hand waving the money around and keeps talking. He had also leaned a lot closer at this point. I tried the door handle to let myself out, but to my surprise, the locks were engaged and I couldn't find any way of unlocking it in the dark. He was completely ignoring my attempts to open the side door and just kept talking to me. I can't remember anything he said anymore, but mostly he carried on the same way he had been, but now it was with more references to watching me bend over the car and doing stuff to me. I was really freaked out by this point and had tried to say that I needed to go several times, but he just kept ignoring me and saying he loved how incredible I was, he didn't even know me. We sat in the dark at the end of my street for about half an hour at that point, with his engine and lights off. There was no way anyone from the houses would have even be able to tell there was anyone in the car if they had looked out of their windows. Then I saw a light turn on in my next door neighbor's window, up a street from us, and I blurted out, "Oh, that must be my mom waiting up for me, I better head in before she calls and starts to worry." The look on his face was genuinely terrifying. He looked like a combination of angry, disappointed, and also contemplative. Like he was trying to decide something. I waved my money at him again and pulled on the door handle, and he popped the locks and let me out. I ran all the way to my front door and let myself in, before locking everything behind me and peeking out the curtains. He didn't drive away for another few minutes, and I remember being aware that he saw me go into my house and also must have known that I lied about the light being my mom, it wasn't even my house. I never saw him again and went back to university 4 days later. I told my mom what happened and she insisted on driving me around for the rest of my stay. To this day I still get nervous taking taxis and always message someone when I have to use one so that they know where I am and when to expect me. I was driving back home with my girlfriend at the time. It was Christmas Eve and my mother's family used to hold a large celebration at my aunt's house in Estacada. This was my girlfriend's first time meeting with my extended family. She got on quite well with them. We spent the majority of the afternoon and evening talking, playing poker, opening presents, and drinking an assortment of adult beverages. My girlfriend had been quite inebriated by the time we had to leave. Therefore, I'd be driving us home. It was around 11 p.m. or so. I was driving my girlfriend's car along the highway. Now, this stretch of road is surrounded by farms and dense patches of forest, and parts of it are unlit. But nothing to fear, I grew up in this area, so I knew this road like the back of my hand. The both of us were driving and talking away, just two young lovers making the most of our moment together. There is a portion of the highway that descends down an enormous hill before crossing Deep Creek. Surrounding both sides of the road are thick forests. There are no lights. The only thing we could see was the area directly in front of our headlights. I drive down the hill, cross the bridge, and uphill through more forest. It's as the highway starts to flatten out that it happens. Something sprints across the road so suddenly that I almost hit whatever it was. I slam on the brakes. I turn to my girlfriend and ask her if she saw it. She confirmed that she had, but she couldn't make out what it was. Maybe it was a coyote, as they are a fairly common sight in this area. But something felt off about it. Whatever it was that ran in front of car disappeared into the woods next to the road. Coyotes don't usually just dart out in front of cars. Not like that anyway. So, for some reason, I decided to check it out. I turn the car around and switch on the high beams to better light up the forest in which this thing had vanished in. I step out of the car and walk towards the woods. I don't see anything. But now it feels like perhaps I'd made a grave error. My heart is pounding and the hairs on the back of my neck are standing at full attention. But I still don't see anything unusual in the trees. Suddenly the car's horn blasts. I walk back into the car and ask my girlfriend why she leaned on the horn like that. She said nothing, instead, she pointed to a spot about 50 feet from where I was standing. I looked over in that direction, and that's when I saw it. Surely this was the thing that ran in front of our car. It was a man. He was completely naked. His skin was covered in dirt and mud. And in one of his hands, he was holding a hatchet. He looked back at us. And then he smiled and waved to us just before turning around and walking back into the forest. Needless to say, we got the hell out of there. Once we were safely driving again, my girlfriend explained what had just happened. While I was trying to look for the man in the area he initially vanished in, he circled back around and came out from another spot in the forest, beyond my car headlights. My girlfriend had seen something out of the corner of her eye. And that's when she saw him. Before she honked the horn, he was walking towards me, his hatchet raised as if making to strike me. We called the authorities once we got safely back home. But they never found anybody, or they did and just didn't tell us. But the officer we spoke to explained his theory. The man was obviously looking to ambush unsuspecting lone travelers for Lord only knows what reason. We all agreed that my girlfriend's quick thinking saved my life, as it let my potential killer know that I wasn't alone out there. I moved back into the area recently. So I now drive that highway often. No naked hatchet man sightings yet. But I can tell you that I'm definitely extra vigilant now. Especially near Deep Creek.